All right, so some folks were asking about getting started and kind of, I guess, my setup while I was getting started. I'm still getting started, but um, so I thought I would just go through a few things, kind of which things I started with and kind of where I found them. And I hope you guys aren't expecting big production quality because, yeah, that's not me. Anyway, I started with these Mai Liang paints. It was a set of 46. You can get them in smaller sets. I like to have all the colors. You guys will see that later. But I just thought it was kind of a good base, especially I'm not somebody that necessarily wants to mix up all my colors. I know a lot of people like to do that, but when I looked around, I was trying to find kind of a, I guess, a mid-level paint. I didn't necessarily want professional because I didn't know if I was going to stick with this and do this a lot. But I also didn't want, your grade school paints either. So this one popped up. It seemed to fit the bill. And I've actually really liked these paints. I still use these paints sometimes. They often have colors that I can't find in other brands. So initially there was a plastic tray that held these in. I took that out and just put magnets on the bottom so I could rearrange them and give myself a little extra space. When I did, I marked the color on the side and on the bottom, and that just gave me a little more room. One thing I don't like about the kind of pre-made palettes like this is that the paints are kind of crammed together, so you do get some cross-contamination. Like you can see, I've got different colors on this. And I'm one of those people that kind of bothers me, so I'm not a huge fan of that, but it's just kind of what happens when you get palettes like this. It also came with several iridescent colors. I don't use these a whole lot. I mean, they're fun to kind of play with and stuff, but I don't tend to use them a lot. So I took them out just to give myself a little more space, and then I do grab them every so often to play with. Clearly my Payne's Blue is one of my go-tos, given how much of it I've used. Most of your metal palettes like this will come, or even your plastic ones will come with this like a mixing space. You can see I've still got some paint here. But that's a great area to mix in. It's usually good. It doesn't tend to bead or anything like that. So that's helpful. Some people will also reach for something like a plastic palette if they want to mix up colors. You can get these kinds of things at pretty much any place that sells art supplies. So they're, $1 a piece maybe. And I mean, they're not bad to have around. But yeah, these Mai Liang paints. I actually really like them. Like I said, I still like them. I still reach for some of these colors, especially because I haven't found matches anyplace else. I did buy some tube paints. I have found personally that I prefer tube paints over pan paints. That's just my personal feel for it. That's a discussion for a whole nother time, and that's really just a personal preference. On a side note, I did find, so this is just a lid from IKEA, the Kugis bins, I think is what they came with. These are literally, I don't know, 50 cents or $1 a piece or something, and they are a wonderful mixing surface. They're not sloped the way a lot of palettes are, and so if you're like me and I don't necessarily want my stuff mixing together, then it does stay a little better in those areas. It is pretty deep too, so you're not gonna have to worry about that. But if you've got an IKEA and you just want some cheap uh, space to mix up some paints, you can't go wrong with this. I still use this, especially if I'm mixing up a whole lot and I don't want to run out, then this gives me plenty of space for that. I also started with these brushes. These are the Artify brushes. So I found these and my paints on Amazon. These brushes not the best brushes in the world, but I actually still use these brushes at times. I'll be honest, the size 8, oh, where are you? This one. This is still my favorite size 8, and I probably have at least a half a dozen size 8s. It's very snappy. I like the tip on it. It goes into my regular brushes that I use all the time. I also use the size 12 because it's not a brush that I use a lot. I just don't feel the need to buy a quote better one. This does the job. So this set comes with pretty much anything you need to start. You do get, you know, some of your straight edge, pretty much all the rounds you need, and then, you know, like your liners and your fine line stuff. So like I said, I actually like these brushes still. I still reach for them on occasion, especially that size 8, which is definitely my favorite. This also came with is it in here? There's my 6. It had a size 7 brush. It's probably around here in my regular somewhere, that seemed like an odd size, but honestly, it was also one of my favorites. The 7 and the 8 were the ones that I used the most as a general rule. So again, I still use these, still like them, don't have any complaints. They weren't expensive as far as brushes go. You know, you can always replace as you go along with better stuff when you feel the need. But guys, you don't have to start with super expensive stuff from the beginning. So it's a choice. As far as paper goes, you're going to see a lot of debate about cellulose paper versus cotton paper. I'll be honest, I am not a person that is going to use very expensive paper if I don't feel like any of my stuff is going to be up to par, or, you know, I don't know. I'm just not that person. And I know a lot of people say, oh, you can cut it up and do smaller. If you want to go that route, that's cool. You know, I think that if you can, whatever you can find that you're comfortable with using, then that's the one you use. So I actually found a cellulose paper that I like, that I still actually use, and that's this B Studios, or B Paper Company, I'm sorry. And I honestly, I found this at Walmart, so it wasn't terribly expensive. It has 50 sheets. I just feel like it handles everything well. It doesn't tear. It even handles masking fluid well. It's a more natural white color, so if you want that bleached white, then that's a whole different thing. This actually comes in a pad, so your sides are not all glued down. Some people prefer this style, and that's fine. As far as your cotton paper goes, my favorite right now is this Kilimanjaro paper. So this happens to be one of their sketchbooks. So it is spiral bound. So the cool thing about the Kilimanjaro is that your covers are actually this good 300-pound paper as opposed to 140-pound paper. So it does create a cover that you can paint and create your own design, and then it's really uniquely yours. Between all of your watercolor pages, you have this, I guess, sketch paper technically. So it's, you know, if you want to create sketches beforehand, or you just want to use them as a divider, which is kind of what I'm doing because I can't even draw stick figures. It's kind of cool to have that. Or if you just want to make notes or something like that, then this is a nice way to do it. You can paint on both sides of this paper. I haven't done it yet. I just haven't gotten that far. So my first test on this paper was just to do some doodly things. I wanted to see how the paper took the water and the paint and that kind of thing. And honestly, this is the first time I used it, and I completely fell in love with it. So like I said, I did practice some doodly stuff. I'm not necessarily very good at it, but I ended up with a couple things here that I actually really liked. So doodling it can be fun. Sometimes it's just to relax your brain. I was kind of using this as something I could do really quickly. You know, I could do a block a day or whatever I felt like if I just didn't have a lot of time. So again, you know, this is definitely my favorite cotton paper. It's inexpensive as far as cotton papers go. The only downside is that you can only get it from cheapjoes.com. which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, they're not a bad price. They're not bad shipping or anything like that. It's just you can't just run out and get it. So I have painted this scene a few times, but because I was very familiar with it and I wanted to see how how the paper took to something that was going to get wetted repeatedly and you know have that volume of water, I redid this and just really impressed with how it held up. I am kind of sloppy when I paint and don't really care about I guess the borders. I also didn't hold this down with a clip, so it did slide, and that's part of the reason I got that little bleed over. So again, I love this paper. You can get it. I usually choose the natural white as opposed to the like bleached down white. It comes in a whole bunch of different sizes. I have a 9x12 sketchbook too that I actually haven't even opened yet because I haven't started it. And then I want to say they do come in blocks, but all of the stuff I've gotten so far has actually just been the pad, so it's not glued down on all the sides. But this is just, like I said, this is definitely my favorite you know, cotton paper. If that's what you want to use, then I highly recommend the Kilimanjaro paper. It's fabulous as far as I'm concerned. It's a really solid paper. I do have some Arches paper. I'm not a huge fan, especially for the price. And it's just, in fact, I have some I haven't even opened yet because of it. I am lucky enough that I live pretty close to a decent art store and they have a lot of options. So this New York Central Art Supply cotton paper is not bad either. You can get it in pads, but you can also get it in these blocks. And this is a painting that I finished here a few days ago, but on blocks, your stuff is actually glued most of the way around. You've got a little opening here that you can use when you're done to pry it up. At first I didn't like blocks, but now I actually do. The blocks are nice because they're already held down. You don't have to tape them down to an artboard or to something else. And if you want to paint all the way to the edge, which I do sometimes, then you can do that. It's just, they come in handy. The only downside is that you can't use multiple sheets at a time because they're all glued down. So at some point I will show you how to lift this out, because I was very confused, and I know some people do get confused on these and then they don't like them initially, and then a lot of it seems to be that they just don't understand how to get the paper out. But again, this company is not a bad company. Their paper holds water pretty well. It definitely holds paint really well. So I do like it a good bit. There are a few things that I think are handy to have. I mentioned Artboard a moment ago. So you can buy this stuff pretty much any art supply store or Amazon or wherever. When you've got loose paper, like the paper that's in the pads that's only glued on one side, sometimes it's helpful to pull it out and tape it down to your artboard. This helps keep it from warping or bleeding, that kind of thing. I also use this is just an art tape. I think I got this one on Amazon, but I have a bunch of different sizes depending on what I'm using. And this just, holds it down. It's kind to your paper, so it doesn't tend to pull it up. It doesn't tend to rip it. Sometimes masking tape can, I feel like, rip a little easier. So there's that. You don't have to have fancy artboard. You can use cardboard. Some people will just tape to their desk. I don't like to do that because sometimes I want to turn my stuff. I've used a clipboard. I mean, you can use pretty much anything. With that said, I just also want to note that you can buy brown hardboard at Lowe's, Home Depot, pretty much any like lumber supply company is going to have some of this stuff. It's called brown hardboard. It's basically the same kind of surface. The only difference is that the back side is textured. So you're not going to be able to paint from both sides necessarily, but you can get a 4x8 sheet. I think they have 4x4 sheets. And it's significantly cheaper to buy it this way and just cut it down. So if you have the ability to do that, you can do that. But the thing with the artboard and this brown hardboard is that if it gets wet, it's not going to warp. It's not going to lift up. It's not going to have any issues. So getting it wet's not a problem. And of course, when you're doing watercolor with it, or maybe it's just me and I'm really sloppy, then that makes a big difference, because you don't want something that's going to bubble up or cause problems later on. So I do highly recommend you get something like that if you can. The other thing is, when you're doing journals, that kind of thing, then you need some clips. So all of these actually just came from Dollar Tree. Depending on what I'm using, how wide of tape I'm using, it'll vary what clips I use. And I also have some bigger clips that I got at my art supply store. Again, these were cheap. I think they were like $1 a piece. So for bigger stuff, or if you're traveling and you're out in the open and you want to use this to help hold stuff, then that's a decent option too. So, you know, just having some of these are kind of handy. So also, I started with some cheaper watercolor journals. I have 2 different sizes here. So this one is actually, I think, a 5x5, and I want to say this one's like a 6x8, if I remember correctly. So these are not cotton journals. They're just cellulose journals. This is the Reflections brand, again, at my local art store. And I got them in part because they were pretty inexpensive, but overall I actually really ended up liking them. I didn't have any bleed through from the backside. I really didn't have any issues with them. So the great thing about journals is there's no pressure. So if you've got a page that didn't turn out well, or yeah, you don't like this or whatever, that's cool, because it's just your journal. And sometimes you're going to have pages you're like, wow, that turned out great. And then pages where you're like, oh, wow. And then you can also just practice in these and not waste your good paper, that kind of thing. I'll kind of run you through a little bit here. I have finished 2 journals. I finished both of the ones you just saw, but you can see that, I mean, some of it's just practice. Some of it's a little more serious. You'll see, I love my jellies, so I'll paint jellies every so often just because it makes me happy. But this is me practicing some pansies, and then I realized that they actually do have 5 petals. And then sometimes it's just a relax your brain thing. You just want to do something that's simple, that you can paint, that you don't have to really think about. Sometimes you're just playing with colors and how they work together. So sometimes they're more serious paints, sometimes they're not. This is also a great spot to have your fails. You know, this started off as one thing that didn't go as planned, so I said, okay, well, screw it, I'm gonna throw some stuff on top of it and call it a day, and that's okay. So that was kind of another one of those situations. I was also trying to do a little bit of a salt test, but this is also like, this is one attempt at something, and then there's a second attempt. So it's kind of cool to be able to do that and look back. And like I said, a lot of times this is just practice. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to be perfect. Some practice flowers, you know, just practicing bleeding. I wanted to practice a tree. These are little roses. I practice flowers a lot because I'm not very good at them. And sometimes it's just doodly stuff, and that's okay. So, you know, again, some relax your brain stuff. You know, you just want to put some paint to paper and you don't really want to think about it. And that's, you know, journals and sketchbooks and stuff are definitely the way to go. I do still recommend finding something with 140-pound paper, because watercolors are definitely, you know, heavy on the water. So, but these are just, you know, again, some stuff that I did. And it's, you know, nothing special for the most part in these. And I had a couple things. I was trying to come up with a flower I liked for a project I was working on. And, you know, like I said, sometimes you have stuff that you really like in here, and then sometimes you got stuff that you're like, wow, that's really terrible. So it's okay. This was a failed salt test. So I, you know, slapped some stuff over it and was like, yeah, okay, I'm good. It just depends on what you want to do, and that's okay. You know, like I said, these journals are great because they're no pressure. You know, if you see tutorials that you really like and you want to do, these were both Andrea Nelson art tutorials, and she did them in the 2 different colors, so I decided to give it a go. Sometimes, again, it's just to relax your brain. You want to just put some paint down, again, some more flower stuff. But that's the great thing about journals and sketchbooks and stuff like that, is it doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be perfect. And to me, that makes it a lot lower pressure. So my jellies, because I love painting jellies. But those kinds of things, you know, a good sketchbook. Like I said, these, I actually even rebought these. I do have some better quality sketchbooks, but I did rebuy these because I like them and they're inexpensive. So I will actually show you my first couple of paintings. I got this paper because it was easy to get, and a lot of people like it. I hate this paper, hate it with a fiery passion. So I have tried to use it a couple times for things, and just, I don't like it, so it's probably going to end up going to somebody else. But this was my very, very first painting. I did this on September 1st. This is an Andrea Nelson art. It was actually, I had seen several of her tutorials, but it was actually this one that I was like, wow, that looks really fun, and I really love the jellyfish. And so I did it, and I will paint jellyfish sometimes just when I don't even know what to paint, but I want to. So this was one of her tutorials. I highly recommend her. She is fabulous. And then this from 2nd of September 24 was actually my second attempt at a painting. And overall, not bad, but I did repaint this somewhere along the way and liked my results a little better. So, you know, again, when you've got something like this that's you can use as a sketchbook, if something doesn't go well, or hey, you're just starting and you want to do some stuff, cool. You know, you can do it that way. And this, like, I started this, ended up not liking it. You can see that the tape tore. I kind of abandoned that one. I don't even know what I was trying to do there. I clearly had a plan and then just left it. And then I did this painting a while back because I was going to use this as a journal, basically. But the reaction of this paper when I did this is what made me go, okay, I'm out. It didn't handle the masking fluid well. You can see it tore. It just didn't handle the water very well at all, but I still actually pretty like this one a lot. But I will probably pull these out and donate them to somebody because I can't deal with this paper. But when people talk about supplies, you know, the best supply that you're going to get is the one that you're going to use. And I hear some people say that, thankfully. I hear a lot of people say, oh, you know, start with the best because your results are going to be better. But sometimes, you know what, you're not comfortable with that. Or you were like me, where you thought, you know, am I even going to keep up with this? Is this something I'm actually going to want to do later on? You know, your best supplies are the ones you're going to use. So if that means that you start with, you know, your mid-level paints like I did, or heck, if you can only find, you know, Crayola or Prang, you know, there's a lot of videos out there to help you get the best out of those that you can get. You know, that's okay. Don't feel like you have to spend all this money or you have to get the best paints, you know, because even the best paints are debatable. Just do what you're comfortable with, what you can do, and go from there. You know, a lot of times people get really obsessive about stuff like that, but again, you know, if you're not going to use it, it's not doing you any good. You're not learning from it. You're not doing anything with it. It's just going to sit there. I kind of feel that way about my artist paper. You know, I don't know. It's so expensive, and I just feel like, do I really want to paint on this? Whereas, you know, the Kilimanjaro paper is honestly every bit as good as the artist paper. It's less expensive, and I am so much more apt to do that. So yes, it does make a difference what paper you use, but if you're not going to use it, then it's not going to make a difference. So choose what you're comfortable with, what you can afford, what you have available is big. You know, not all of us are lucky enough to have an art store or have the ability to order something online or whatever. So, you know, start where you can, and you can always build up to other things later, and that's okay. I hate this idea that some people, oh, you have to spend all this money. You know I see a lot of the people pushing like the primary color palettes from Daniel Smith or Winsor Newton. Don't get me wrong, they're great. But, you know, for me, I like a lot of colors. I'd much rather start with maybe a mid-level range and have more colors than to start with the primary palettes that only give you 3 or 6 colors. And I'll be honest, I don't really enjoy color mixing like that. I understand color theory just fine. I do not enjoy the mixing part. It's one thing for me to tweak a color, you know, hey, I need this a little more yellow or a little more green or whatever. It's a whole other ball game for me to mix a main color you're going to use. So I'm not a fan of that. A lot of people look down on that. That's fine. Again, that's personal preference. But, you know, again, your best supplies are the ones you're going to use. So find what you're comfortable with using, what, you know, the stuff that you're comfortable spending money on, you know, if you don't stick with it, or this is just a starting point or whatever, because you can always upgrade that stuff later. And that's something I feel like is not emphasized enough or not stressed enough. You can always upgrade later, and that's cool. You know, I've definitely upgraded. I've got a lot of porcelain or ceramic porcelain palettes. I've got more paints than I know what to do with, more brushes than I know what to do with, that kind of thing. But, you know, you've got to remember that a lot of that stuff is a lot of personal preference. So I'm going to add 2 more things because I actually kind of forgot while I was doing this, that you're going to want to buy. So a spray bottle. This is a cheapy dollar, like Walmart spray bottle. And this one came from Amazon. It came in a set of 2. So a lot of people use this to wet their paints and sometimes to wet paper down. I will use this sometimes. It's a little spattery for me. So when I'm doing that, I actually prefer this one, which is a little more of a misty option, I guess, for lack of a better word. The other thing is when I wet my paints, I actually prefer these little plastic pipettes because I like to just add paint add water to my paint kind of individually, and you know, I can kind of control my amount of water this way. Also, when you're spraying, especially with the one that spatters, it can push your colors around and sometimes do the cross contamination, which I don't like. And the other thing that I will say that you're going to want is, you know, whatever pencil you're comfortable with. I happen to like mechanical pencils, but a good kneaded eraser is going to be invaluable because it doesn't leave a lot of debris behind. If you're sketching, you can also use this to like roll over your stuff and gently lift so your sketch lines are really light. Again, these are pretty cheap. And they're like, you know, just invaluable, and you can shape it. So if you really need to get a nice edge in there and pull something up, you can do that with these. So those are definitely a couple things I think when you're getting started come in very handy, and then you can just play with your eraser too. But you know, again, you have to get started, and if you're more comfortable getting started with some, you know, cheaper supplies, cool, do it. The thing that counts is that you did it and you got started. So good luck. I don't know if that helped anybody, but hopefully so. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. I will do another video kind of going over my current setup and just some tips that I think beginners will find useful. Again, there's a lot of emphasis on, you know, buying expensive stuff, but there's a lot of options out there to do the job, I guess, just as well. So, you know, hope that helped. And remember, you know, just get started.